Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 68th in our webinar series. Been looking forward to this one. We've got a pretty good technical topic where we're going to talk about data analysis, and the title of it is Quantifying Performance, Driver or Vehicle. And it's a question that we get quite a bit where we chat back and forth, and okay, we were just faster and by 2 or 3 miles per hour. Was it the car or was it the driver? Was it, how do we break this down? Yes, we can see what happened. We were faster. We could even see where, but we really want to know is why. And we've done this a lot, but more looking at just car adjustments or driver adjustments, but sometimes they're hard to tell which is which. So we're going to talk about that in some detail today with our co-host Jonathan Goring. And looking forward to this one. Again, welcome everybody. Let's introduce Jonathan. And here's a little slide on Jonathan. I've known Jonathan for quite a few years. Certainly, we chatted on email and some other things first, and then we see each other at the tracks a little bit. Jonathan's a little bit of a kindred soul with me. I owned the car. My son drove the car as the 2006 SCCA Spec Miata National Runoffs Champion, and Jonathan is a Runoffs Champion as well in 2015. So I always get a kick out of chatting with people and following the class that we used to race in as well. So Jonathan, give us a little bit. Number one, tell everybody hi, and then give us a little bit about you and your background.
Oh, thank you, Roger. I always appreciate you guys having me for these webinars. Really been looking forward to this one especially. I grew up in Connecticut, about 20 minutes from Lime Rock. My parents raced vintage Alfa Romeos, so I caught the bug very early on, and pretty much never left the track since. So like I said, Lime Rock's my home track, but I've done a bit of travel with both my racing and coaching, more racing in the early years and more coaching in the later years. But I've been fortunate enough to capture 3 national championships, first of which being 2006 Skip Barber National Series when they were running that. And then followed up by 2008 IMSA Lights Championship. And then, as Roger mentioned, the most recent is my SCCA Spec Miata Championship. Obviously, racing is in my blood. I love what I do. I've been instructing for various different organizations and myself privately. Most of my coaching on the weekends is at Lime Rock Drivers Club, one of their primary instructors there. And, been branching out and doing a bit of travel with other programs. And lastly, kind of a second passion of mine that does tie into racing a little bit is fitness too. So welcome, guys.
Thank you for being here. As Jonathan mentioned, this is his second time, and it is, and he mentioned he's been looking forward to this topic for a while. We actually talked about this topic when Jonathan did the first one, and we were talking about, should we just do that? And we decided to push, we needed to do only one of the topics, so we did the first one first, and then here we are with the second one. So when Jonathan says he's been looking at this one for a long time, that is true. So again, if you have some questions, make sure you plug them in. We're going to, I think we're going to go ahead and share. We're going to just jump right into live data and chat about what we're going to chat about today. That is it the vehicle or the driver and how to tell the difference. So let me share Race Studio. Okay. And then I'm going to give the mouse over to Jonathan, and let's see, if I could read. Jonathan, you should be able to click on that. There you go. Okay, yep. Race Studio 2, what we're going to start with, we're going to show you a couple of different tests. We're going to start, this one's Lime Rock, obviously, from the shape of the track. We're going to switch in the middle to another track and another set of data and show kind of the same things with a little bit more focus on what the detail will be. And so if you see something, make sure that you let us know. And Jonathan's just getting the screen set up just the way that he likes, as you can see. And Jonathan, go ahead and take over and give us an overview of what we're going to talk about first, and then let's start to dig in.
Awesome. Sounds good. So today's topic, just like Roger was saying, quantifying performance, is gains in lap time or corner speed a result of the driver, or is it a result of the car, or a combination of both? This is a really important topic that I'm passionate about because, I know that some people will make a change to their car, they'll go a little quicker out on the track, and they'll decide, whether they went faster or slower, they'll say, it was the car. But the good thing is with the data, with Ames data here, you can really dive into more details and take a look at some things to see, again, was it something the driver did, or was it something the car did better?
And one of the cool things is we have link overload today. It says in the chat box, we are since this is some technical stuff that Jonathan's talking about, he has made this data available for you. The links are in the chat box. Those of you that are watching this on YouTube later, the links for the data files, the user profiles, and the math channels will all be down in the description box that you can download and follow along if you want to use this exact same data with this same look. So just wanted everybody to know that the presentation didn't have any slides in it other than the intro and the outro, so we're not going to make that available today as a link in the box there. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Jonathan.
Oh, thank you, Roger. Okay, so just a little bit about what we're looking at here. This is some very basic channels that we're looking at. I do have two custom math channels. However, it's very easy to tell what you're looking at. This is GPS data from a Solo. So we're not looking at any throttle position, RPM, anything like that just yet. This is just simply the G sensors using the GPS and the accelerometers in the Solo. So the first thing I want to do is show you exactly what these squiggly lines mean. Up here, we have the GPS speed up top. I'm sure that most everybody is familiar with that. The second one we have down here is inverse longitudinal acceleration. So when you get your Solo, if you put it in your car, fire it up, get it configured, take it out, you're going to notice that your longitudinal Gs, if you're decelerating, are actually going to be a negative value. It would be down here. And what I've done is I've created a math channel here. I'll go up and show you. And if we go over to inverse longitudinal acceleration, what you're going to see here is the formula for it. Quite simply, it's just a negative in front of the GPS longitudinal acceleration. And the reason that I flip this is if you move on to, maybe you got MXL or MXM or a bigger, badder logger, you're going to get some brake pressure sensors you can configure with that. And with brake pressure, it's actually going to be more brake pressure would be a positive value. So I find by flipping the longitudinal Gs into a positive value under deceleration, it just makes for an easier transition into a brake pressure sensor. When the time comes, you do get that. The third one I have down here, this is just like the speed trace. This is the holy grail of driver performance. Put quite simply, the more Gs the driver can produce, the faster he's going to be around the track. So whether that be longitudinal under braking, longitudinal under accelerating, or lateral under quartering forces, right? The more Gs the driver produces, the more he's going to get out of the car, he or she, and the quicker the lap time should be. And I'll show you the other math channel for the G sum. I know we've covered this in some of the other webinars, okay, so I'll just kind of touch on it quick. So G sum is GPS lateral acceleration squared, add it to GPS longitudinal acceleration also squared, and then you take the square root of the entire thing, and that's going to give you basically a summation of the Gs. This is good to look at as a driver coach, because I want to know, how not only how hard is the driver slowing down, but when they come off the brake, how well are they turning that longitudinal load into lateral load as they roll off the brake and get to the turn into the corner. What I just explained is very representative of a friction circle. So this is the XY plot in the Ames system here. This is super useful. Again, I've set this up showing a friction circle. So on the x-axis here, you have your lateral Gs. It's really important to scale these identical side to side so that you're seeing a true representation of a friction circle here. Scaling on the y-axis, you just want to make sure you have enough to see all the braking force that was produced and all the acceleration force that was produced. Now, I talked briefly about how basically producing Gs is the holy grail of driver performance, right? So what I have here are 2 laps. I have, this is actually my data from Lime Rock. This is in a NB Miata. It's not a spec Miata. It's actually just a track day car. But on this occasion, it actually did have Hoosiers, the SM7s bolted up. And then on another occasion, we have a street tire, right? Okay. So obviously the Hoosier is going to be producing more grip. the street tire will be producing less grip. Now, being said, we expect to see that the Hoosier tires are going to be more on the outer ends of the friction circle here. So we see that's the Hoosier is the green, right? So we expect to see green further out all around the friction circle. And for the most part, we do. There's a couple anomalies, like we have right here, and then we have right here. So it's important to know that with the friction circle here, what we're seeing is everything that we're seeing in the measures graph. So this is a demonstration of a full lap worth of G-force data. If I were to zoom in to one particular corner, you would go ahead and see this change. Actually, before I do that, one of the things I want to point out real quick is the time compare bar. This is very important when you're trying to decide whether something was like I said before, a gain in vehicle performance or a gain in driver performance. In this case, we have two completely different tires. The Hoosiers grip a lot more. The other tire grips a lot less. So we know that not only is our time going to be slower on the street tire in the turns, but since we come out of the turns, it's also going to be slower on the preceding straightaway. So with the time compare bar at a near perfect 45-degree angle, this means that we are losing time at the same rate over the course of the lap. All right, so that's one of the things that you're going to see that's very common if you're comparing two different tires with the same driver. If we had a car with a bit more horsepower, let's say it was a spec Miata and we took the restrictor plate out, you would see that the time compare bar would actually fall on the straightaways but level out in the turns. So again, use the time compare bar at just a quick glance just to see, where is the driver losing time. And not only is that something you want to do when comparing different tires, vehicle versus driver, but just in driver coaching in general. All right, so what I want to do here is I'm going to zoom into turns 1 and 2, call this Big Bend at Lime Rock. All right, so first thing that catches my eye, we're looking at the time compare bar. You can see this is the area where I start to lose time on these street tires, okay? Again, it's a pretty linear progression of loss of time. We have our speed here. You can see that the speeds start to separate here. This is where I'm coming off the brake, rolling a little bit of speed into the corner. We can confirm that here on our inverse launch G. This is where I'm softening up on the brake. And then finally, we have our G sum channel here. Now, one really interesting thing about Miatas in particular is that when you bolt up a set of Hoosiers or a sticky tire, you're actually going to be producing more lateral Gs than longitudinal Gs. The car is capable of more cornering force than it is braking force. So it's very common in the G sum channel in basically a spec Miata context to see a launch G, a good step up, and then a flat lateral G, right? So looking at just the brake pressure here, or I'm sorry, not brake pressure. This is the longitudinal deceleration, very important difference. You can see that on the Hoosier, I am getting a little bit more bite out of the tire and I'm rewarded by that softer brake. Now you can see that I did have definitely an oversteer moment here, confirm that by the loss of speed, the sudden deceleration. I'd have to look at a little more to make sure that was in fact an oversteer, but something definitely happened. Producing less Gs on the Hoosiers, producing more Gs through the turn. Now, it's important to look at the shape of the traces more so than just the overall difference. If you see, for the most part, the G sum channel is just kind of at this level, and on the red on the street tire, it's kind of just at a lower level. But the general shape is more or less horizontal. So basically speaking, this is an indication of car performance, right? Vehicle performance. Right here, I'm able to roll off the brake and kind of get to some maintenance throttle in this area between turns 1 and 2 there in Big Bend. All right,
what you said there was something that I didn't understand fully, or haven't looked into it enough. That often you'll get that stickier tire. And while there is a little bit more on that longitudinal or under the G's that are available to you under the braking, it really jumps out at you, at least in this data with this type of car, when you start to transition into it being lateral forces and lateral grip from the tires. It seems to really show that. And you mentioned it, but I just wanted to mention it one more time and everybody think about that. And is that the same on the kind of car that you run if you do plug in a stickier tire? That would be something that would be of interest.
Yeah, for sure. The like I was saying, when you put on that stickier tire, you gain more in lateral traction than you do braking traction. So that's kind of a unique thing to a Miata. Although I would be, interested to see some other data on that with some other cars for sure. All right, so we're just going to move on here to the left-hander, the only left-hander at Lime Rock Park. Yeah, people always ask me which left-hander. It's like, well, the only one. Okay, so again, green is Hoosiers, getting a little bit more bite on the deceleration, rolling off of the brake. You can see that the speed traces are more or less parallel, right? There's no major deviation. There isn't one that's, falling down a lot and coming back up. There are, of course, slight differences, but nothing too significant. Because I was slowing down a little harder here, I'm able to kind of ease up on the brake. What I'm looking at here is this drop in the G sum and the green trace. You notice how the red is just kind of a linear line, right? Just horizontal, whereas the green actually has a bit of a drop. This is actually something that's going to be a little bit deceptive here, because if we come back here, if I put the cursor, right back here, and just to give you an idea where we are, this is just before we're getting on the brakes for the left-hander here. You can see that I'm not really slowing down yet, right? I'm still at a negative value in this area, but the G sum is coming up, right? So we know that if the longitudinal G's aren't changing, but G sum is coming up, we looked at the formula before, so we know that's just a function of lateral G's. So the way I run the left-hander at Lime Rock and a Miata is you're actually turning in flat, right? You got a lot of grip, very low horsepower, so you're able to turn the car in pretty flat. What this dip in G sum is a little bit deceptive, okay? Because you're going to see that as I'm increasing my brake pressure, slowing the car more, the G sum is turning into less. Remember how I said that a Miata is capable of more lateral than longitudinal G's? So you're seeing the overall G's drop as I'm adding the longitudinal and getting rid of the lateral, right? So that's as I'm applying the brake, I have to take out a little bit of steering after I've turned in flat. Once we get into the meaty part of the corner, and by the way, anytime that the longitudinal acceleration is around the 0 line, that means that the G sum, when you look at the G sum, it's a very good representation of the lateral forces that are in the car. So you can see, again, along this area, it's pretty consistent, a little bobble right here, but generically speaking, it's pretty consistent that I'm just producing a little bit more G out of the tire. The G sum is more or less the same shape right here. So this is an indication of the driver's doing something very similar. Minor differences, of course, as always, but mostly this is a function of tire. We're talking about drops in G sums. This is something that's important to know. Anytime you're changing direction, so we're coming out of the left-hander, exiting the left-hander and turning into the right-hander, of course, you're going to have a drop in G sum, right? Because even if you're full throttle, the wheel has to be straight at some point when you change direction. So, if you see a drop in G sum when you're changing direction, don't look into that too hard. That's it's a pretty easy reason why that's happening. All right. So moving right along here, let's take a look over in the uphill corner. The uphill is actually my favorite corner at Lime Rock. It's the only corner in the world where too fast and too early are usually a good thing. To an extent, of course. So again, looking at the uphill, I'm going to actually not auto rescale this, which would be done with a double click of the mouse right there. Reason being is since there's not much of a change in speed throughout the entire turn, if I were to double click that, the speed trace would be kind of, all over the place. And the reason that would be is because it'd be very zoomed in, right? It'd be very zoomed in. It'd be a difference of, maybe a few miles an hour across the course of the scale. So I'm going to leave this the way it is just because I feel it's actually a better representation. Same thing with the G's, right? The G's, there's no real big deceleration in the uphill and there's no real big acceleration out of the uphill. right? This is the nature of course, the track, but also the car, right? Again, a lot of grip, but not much power. 120 horsepower at best out of the Miatas. So you can see in the green, I'm coming into the uphill turn. I'm on the throttle. I'm slowing a little bit later, but slowing a lot less, right? So you see the red speed start to drop right here. The green is dropping just a little bit less. And then right about here is on the street tires. This is where I was getting to some power, right? This is where the car was actually starting to accelerate out of the turn. Now, keep in mind, right? If you've been to Lime Rock, you know that there's a very, very steep uphill section just after the apex of the turn here. Okay, you get a very big compression as you go uphill, and then you have a big crest of the hill. It's very much of a leap of faith. Now, again, in a Miata with very little horsepower, this is where you're getting to full throttle, but that doesn't mean that you're going to see lots of acceleration out of the car, right? Because it's so sticky and so low power that even though you're at full throttle, the car is actually slowing down in this area. So this is this data, I'm not going to lie, it's actually pretty tricky to look at. It'd be really cool to have some throttle position sensors to figure out exactly where you are doing that and your increase of throttle. But working with GPS data, you got to keep that in mind. The goal is always to keep this in a negative value. So being said, the further down these traces can be, the better. Now, one thing that stands out, and probably the most important thing that stands out to me in this turn is right here, okay? See where I have that cursor? Move it out of the way so you can see. Right here, I actually reached a higher G-sum, and that's about at the compression of the uphill, right? Now, this is, keep in mind, the red is on the street tires. The green is on the Hoosiers. So yeah, I didn't do the best job on the Hoosiers there, that's for sure. I did actually maintain a peak G for longer. I might have had a little bit earlier line, so maybe I had to turn the car for a longer period of time. But it's definitely an alarm to me that I was able to get a little more Gs out of the out of the street tire, and the conditions were comparable enough that we can assume that definitely I could have done better on the Hoosiers for sure. So this is something that is really important to note. I wasn't slower through the uphill because I didn't have as much grip. I mean, that was partly the reason, but I could have been a little bit less slower on the Hoosiers if I had done a better job at turning the car on the compression of the hill there. So really important to take a look at that stuff and make sure, you're not leaving anything on the table. You don't want to just say, oh, I went slower because I was on the slower tire, right? Often there's going to be a big difference in the shape of the traces, right? So not Absolutely. Just the overall Gs that are produced, but the shape of them.
Absolutely.
So moving right on, West Bend, again, I'm not going to scale this. I'm going to leave this alone. I see that these two lines are more or less parallel. Okay, driver's doing pretty consistent job. If we look in a little more detail, you can see there's definitely a little difference in the braking. It doesn't really amount to too much right here. We can see the time compare bar, again, just near perfect loss of time at the same rate through the turn. And G-sum, we can see for the most part, you're going to see a little bit of noise right here for sure. So not to say that I'm perfect, but you can generally say that there's definitely more grip kind of around the apex of the turn here. Even though I was hanging onto the brake a little longer here, I was producing more grip laterally out of the car. All right.
And some of those bumps and bounces, that can be the gauge moving, and we're getting a little bit of odd data from it. It can be that the car is low. You've hit some curbs. There's all sorts of things that are making some of that oddness in the lines. But you let your eye kind of balance that out. It's always kind of the way that I do it.
Yeah, you kind of want to look at the if you see a lot of noise in the traces, you just kind of look at the average, if you're just make a straight line through the center there. And the other thing too is this Solo is mounted on a Ram suction cup mount. So it is going to move around a little bit. It's always preferable to try and get, if you're using a Solo, try and have a hard mount, right? So you're going to get just a little bit of noise. The data is filtered a little bit, so you are able to kind of, fix that a little bit if need to, but always preferable to have your Solo on a hard mount.
We've got a couple of questions over in the question and answer, but I want to, I'm going to put those off. As soon as you get done with Lime Rock, when we zoom back out, I've got a couple of questions I want to answer in the question and answer. So let me do that before we switch to the other data file.
For sure. Yeah. So, basically case in point, again, the downhill, we're looking at the speed traces, virtually parallel, time compare bar, 45-degree angle, drivers doing something very similar. More G sum through the meaty part of the turn right here, right? This is through the apex. This is just kind of after the compression of the hill. I did slow the car just a bit more on the Hoosiers, probably, because I could do it. But I was very quick to get some lateral load in the car after I did my speed adjustment, right? I was able to keep more consistent, higher lateral load in the car on the way out of the turn.
It's pretty consistent. You're seeing that bump on the in the G sum with the Hoosiers as you apply the brake. So that must tell me that while we aren't able to get a ton more longitudinal grip, that transition when you first get to it, the Hoosier, the stickier tire seems to take it. So we've always had this little bump right here at the entry of the G sum. So kind of an interesting little thing. So.
Yeah, definitely. And it's all about, if you've driven the downhill at Lime Rock in a Spec Miata, there's no brake pedal involved, number one. But number two, it's all about changing direction quickly on when you hit the hill right there. So that's the most important part of that turn.
Some of you haven't been to Lime Rock. My son raced there a couple of times. It wasn't in Spec Miata, but that particular corner, that downhill getting onto the front straightaway was after the first time he went out on the track, and he was racing a Mustang at the time, and he comes in and goes, wow, that's a spooky corner, and there's a wall that is off on the driver's left as you're tracking out, and that wall gets closer. At least it did back then. That wall all of a sudden gets closer. It's a bit of a spooky corner for some.
Yeah, definitely. It's a question of getting the eyes up there for sure.
Okay. Is that done? You done with that that particular piece?
Yep, we can move
on. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit. Had a couple of questions, and one of them was from David Arkin, and he talked about it was here where you were zoomed in, and you had this valley, and you mentioned it, and you talked about it, and it actually was this one, where what a lot of people call in the G-sum is the valley of opportunity, right? Where we see the green line with the Hoosiers, you have this dip. People will call that the valley of opportunity. The best we can do is keep you turn in, and the G-sum climbs, and it should hold nice and true in a perfect world. Everybody's always trying to get better. And then we had this huge valley of opportunity that you mentioned, and your G-sum will, while it's powerful in a lot of areas, the one area that it's of course is going to give you some oddness is because it's taking your lateral G values, and by doing the square root, and then adding them together, it becomes an absolute value. It's always positive. So when you change directions, you've got it G'd up hard to the right, and then you transition for that one corner where it's the other way, right? You're G'd up hard to the left, and you're turning back to the right, in a transition. Of course, your G-sum is going to drop. You have to transition through 0 G's before you can build up to the G's going the other direction. So you'll always have this. That's why G-sums, a lot of people really like to use those in areas where, or you should focus on areas where you're coming down, maybe you brake, and then you or start to turn in and then brake, or brake and then start turning in and then transition out, classic 90-degree corner with one set of lateral values that grow and then release. That's where they work best. But as long as you know that it's going to always peak down, come down here and then come right back up in a transition type corner, left, right, it's so that's what it's going to look like. This is not a valley of opportunity. And the other question is over here in the friction circle, there are 4 X's in here, and that's just a bug in the friction circle. Don't let that, as you move that around, you will see which 2 are actually following the, it's these 2 over here that are actually following the G-sum. If we go to a single one, the X is correct, but when we do the test compare, put both laps on top of each other, there's a bug that keeps the additional 2 X's in there. So try not to let it bother you too much. There's a bit of a workaround for that. So, okay, anything you would like to add, Jonathan, before I change the sample?
Yeah, just real quick, kind of along the same
Okay.
lines of that question. We talk about, just like you mentioned, the valley of opportunity, right? So that would, if you saw that drop in G sum in, let's just say it was a right-hander the whole time, not a change of direction from right to left, but rather just a right-hand corner. If you were to see that valley of opportunity there, that would mean that the driver did not do a good job of transitioning into lat G, so adding steering as he came off the brake to keep it on the outer ends of the friction circle. But yeah, just like you said, Roger, a change of direction, you're going to get that no matter what.
And the one where there is opportunity, I think Jonathan even mentioned as he's walking through it. You look at the Hoosier or the green line that's here, right? It comes up and it's kind of holding true, and then there's this area right here, and there is a bit of a drop, then come back up. It might be the track, it might be any number of things, but there is one where your eye should catch it and go, what happened there? Let's dig into the data and figure out why that happened, right? The ones where you are changing laterally, changing direction, you're coming in and you're turning left and all of a sudden turning right up here in the track map. These are just baked into the cake. You're going to have those drops as you do that, just by the way the math channel is done. Joe asked the question as I'm about ready to change to the next session. What is the workaround for the 4 cursors? As I mentioned, Joe, the only way to get really there is go to a single session. Then you'll see where the cursor is. It works correctly with a single one. The one cursor is running where it belongs. Figure out which cursor is which, and then you can jump back to the test compare and you know which ones are correct. So there's just not a fix for us right now on that. So it's just something you have to work around. Okay, so I'm going to close these 2 tests. And let's one will open up the next 2, which is Jaden at Road America. Let's open these guys up. Let me load a different profile. These user profiles are available for you in the chat box to download and use if you wish to have them. If you want your data to look like this, you can see this is a little bit screwed up. And so we'll load Jaden's user profiles. And it looks like it did it there again. So let's do this real quickly. Every once in a while, the math channel won't quite add up correctly. If a math channel doesn't work right, the GSUM didn't look like it took during the transition. If you just open up any math channels you have are always ran as soon as you open up the math channel box and just click on OK. They're reran. And now if you looked at it really closely when I did it, you would have seen that there was just one GSUM down here, but we have them both now. So perfect. I will turn this. There's no open questions. So Jonathan, let's talk about what is this data and where are we going to look at here and see what we can find.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Roger. Okay. So we've switched gears. We're looking at Road America. This was during the SCCA runoffs, and I was coaching a driver by the name of Jaden. He was in a spec MX-5 race car, and this was I was gonna say weekend, but this was a fun week, right? Because we were able to get a lot of data, really learn a lot about the track, and I set a user profile up for his car based on the stuff that I want to see. So I just want to go through real quick what we're looking at here. So we have our GPS speed as always at the top. That's the money channel. We have our inverse launch G, which I was explaining before what that is. He didn't have a brake pressure sensor, so I always go for that if that's not there. I have a throttle position here. Now you notice that I have this, it's pretty skinny right here. It's not like the other channels. What I'm looking at as a driver coach it's going to be super important here are speed and G's. Throttle position is of course important, but when I'm looking mostly at G's the driver's producing, I'm using the throttle channel just in reference to where in the corner we are. So, is this before brake release? Is this when the driver's initial throttle? Is it full throttle? Just so I have a quick glance at where this is in the turn. Again, G-sum channel, I always have up. Another money channel, just pretty much just as equivalent, just as important as speed. And then lastly, I have an RPM channel up here. Again, this is much like throttle in the sense that I just want to have a quick glance. Is the driver in the same gear through the turn? Because if he's not, obviously that would change things a bit. Down at the bottom, we have the time compare bar, as always. Now, you're going to notice this is it looks a lot different than it did from the Lime Rock one, right? There's more animation to it, right? There's more ups and downs. So this is a good indicator that, okay, the driver is definitely doing something different here, right? If this was just a function of tire, we'd see it more like we did at the 45-degree angle. Now, we are comparing Hoosier Tires versus Toyo. So in testing at the runoffs, we had the Hoosiers bolted up. Later in the weekend, we have to race in the Toyos. So we spent the majority of the week on those at the end there. But good data to compare against. So I'm going to actually switch this over so we see both friction circles here. First question, when we're zoomed out, I always, just like I was saying with the lime rock, I always want to see, where is the driver producing more grip on the Slipperier tire, right? Because that would be an indication of something that the driver did not take advantage of when he was on the Hoosiers there. So we can see, definitely there's a bit of red here. This is a little bit more deceleration on the Toyos. And, laterally, we definitely see more green on the outsides. We got one little bit of red right there. But for the most part, there's more green on the outside. So as we go through the lap, I'm going to kind of want to see what this was, right? Where did this happen? We'll just keep that in mind as we go on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here a bit. All right, so taking a look at turn one, see a difference in definitely minimum corner speed location, right? Where the driver reach the slowest speed in the turn? It's going to be quite a bit different. We see a big dip in G sum right here. I just want to confirm. You can see he's actually on a different line right here, right? So when I was looking at this earlier, I had the SmartyCam video up, and he was actually passing a car on the inside here on the green lap. So it's something we just got to take into consideration as we're looking. Now, time compare bar, again, that's another money channel. You can see that he was actually a little bit quicker out of the turn. This little upswing at the end, that's just because I have turn 3 into view just a little bit. So if we were to do a delta, we would do that from just before he let off the gas to brake for the corner to just before he got on the brakes for turn 3. And you can see that he was a tenth and a half quicker on the red. So yeah, he had the outside line for sure. That's the good thing. So we had more radius through the turn, but the big thing that I'm seeing actually on both these occasions is just like Roger was talking about before, that valley of opportunity, right? This is an example where this is definitely something the driver is not doing correctly. We've talked a lot about the measures graph, but if we take a look at the friction circle over here, you can see on the green, he gave up a lot of launch G. Didn't really start adding lateral G into this area. Once he started adding the lateral G with the steering wheel, it was a good transition from slowing down into steering. But on the red, this is what you're looking for. You see this little indent right here, right? So this line should basically be a 45-degree angle here. And this little hiccup right here, that's going to be, that's something you definitely want to look for. So as the driver's coming around here, you can see kind of right in this area, that's where there is that valley of opportunity where he could have either gotten on the brake, softened the brakes up a little bit sooner in the brake zone, or maybe brought the brake point a little bit later. Either way, you just wanted to arrive a few miles an hour faster, knowing you could get off the brake, start softening that brake pressure, and start rolling a little side load into the turn.
There's a question in the question and answer from David Arkin that is, you have a lot of experience at Road America, so I thought we would bring it up, even though he says we can take the answer off the webinar. But he was talking about, he had seen some bunch of data. He was at the runoffs there, this year, I think, and so from exceptional drivers, SCCA championship drivers, and they were able to not have too many valley of opportunities in the GSUM at all of the corners, but turn 1 always had a bit of that, even with these drivers that are super good. Is what he's asking is turn 1, is there a characteristic there? Is there something about the lay of the track? It loses some slope out of the roadway. Is there something there that you've run into in the past, or are you typically able to get around that in data at Road America?
I'd say technically no, but in actuality and practicality, yes, because it kind of, there's a little bit, when you go to the brakes, it's kind of a little bump, and it also goes downhill. So there's a big, the road changes out from under you. So to be able to have a perfect G sum, I mean, you're talking about some unbelievable driving for sure. So
Okay.
I'm definitely not surprised that that's a common thing. Doesn't mean
Very
it's
cool.
right though.
Yeah, you always would work on it, certainly, but I love it. We just went through some very quickly, but we did what happened, where did it happen, and then we got into the why. And to me, that's always the hardest of the three, and it's the most important. And maybe there was something with the track. It's something we can look at in the video, look at it in the data, and see if we can improve it. And sometimes the track does just fall away.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, good question. Thank you for that. All right, so we're gonna move on here to turn 3. See what the driver did here. See what the car did here. I'll rescale the speed so it's a little bit easier to see. Rescale this. All right. So look at the time compare bar.
Big
Driver,
change.
yeah, driver lost a lot coming in. He did get a better exit, but then, man, what happened here? Right, that's weird. He was at full throttle the whole time. Shifts were about the same. What this actually was is a bump draft. Okay, so in Spec Miata, Spec MX-5, if you ever race that, you know that typically on the straightaways, you're on somebody's bumper more than you're not, right? Okay, so this is something that's really cool to see in the data. Just how much you gain, right? So before he got that bump, about 107.5 miles an hour, right? And then after that bump, now there's 2.5 mile an hour difference, right? In the course of just a few feet, right? So it really goes to show you that's one of the things that you wouldn't know. You won't be able to quantify how much that bump is actually helping you if you didn't have the data, right?
It's funny. We have looked at a lot of data here in our webinars, and we've tried to use data to understand what has happened, and but we've never looked at a bump draft, and you wonder why some of these cars that go out there and do a lot of that. I mean, a 2.5 mile per hour gain in about 30 feet is it gives you pretty well good proof why these Spec Miata guys and the MX-5 Cup and a lot of these guys are out there pushing each other around. It's a big difference in a low horsepower car.
Oh, no doubt. Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's interesting. That's something we have not shown in data here before.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, being said, if I were to, measure the delta on this, right? How well did the driver do? I'd want to start the start point right before the driver got on the brakes and out of the gas for turn 3. But I'd want to set the end delta just before that happened, right? Okay, so you can see, 2/10 basically, almost 3, and then by the time you get to the brake zone of 5, we're talking 4/10. So when you're doing these deltas, if you see something like this in your data, you want to take that out of the equation, right? If we're talking about just driver performance. All right, going into the actual corner part of this, we're looking for Outliers in the friction circle. We're looking for drops in G sum. I definitely see one right here. So again, this is the driver coming to the brakes, getting onto the brake pedal. And you can see in the Hoosiers that he was actually able to kind of work onto some side load before he started getting rid of the longitudinal load. But in the red, as he was coming off of the brake, right? As he was coming off the brake, he wasn't replacing it with that lateral load in the car. So the green line has a little bit, it's a little bit more like this as opposed to like that. And that's what we're seeing kind of right here in this area. Now, interestingly enough, he does get to the same lateral force, right? So this is kind of when you're just starting to, looks like half throttle area, he's still got a bit of side load in the car. He's actually got the same amount of side load that he did with the Toyos. He did with the Hoosiers. So, that would indicate that, although he doesn't have the drop in the G sum here, he did leave something on the table in terms of the overall Gs that he could have produced. So looking at this, where, it really tells the story of, both drivers definitely could have done a bit better. Here he could have rolled off the brake a little sooner, started adding some steering into the car, leaning on that tire a little harder. Or in the green lap, he probably could have maybe picked up a little bit more initial throttle and just kind of leaned on the tire harder in the middle meaty part of the turn.
Interesting. Same driver again. Everybody, same driver with 2 different sets of tires in the same time frame, right? During the same event, right?
Exactly.
Same event weekend.
And on the friction circle, you see the green producing more grip coming across, and the red, just a little bit less. But again, the shape is what we're looking for. That's going to be the big difference when answering the question, did the driver do something different?
Yeah, the red one left some on the table there, certainly.
All right, we're going to move on here to turn 5. All right, so one thing jumps out at me a lot, okay? Obviously, we have the loss of time in this area, but one thing jumps out even more is, just taking a look at the deceleration here, right? Again, just like Roger said, this is on the Toyo, the red is on the Toyos, the green's on the Hoosiers. The Hoosiers should be able to produce more grip under braking, therefore slow down harder. This green line, should probably be definitely be above that red line, right? So driver was definitely doing a better job here on the brake pedal. Now, keep in mind that this is a G channel. This is not a brake pressure channel. So this doesn't necessarily mean that on the red, he was pushing the brakes harder. Maybe in the green, he was actually pushing the pedal harder, but was getting into the ABS and he was actually slowing down a little bit less. So important distinction to make when you're thinking, is this a brake channel or is this a G channel? Again, it's a G channel. So we'd have to figure out why. Why is the driver producing more grip in this area? And, it doesn't seem like much, but it's over a big distance. If we do a delta from here to here, turn 5 is a long brake zone. So, this is 324 feet where he's, not getting the most out of the car.
2.2 seconds worth of braking. There's time lost there.
Exactly. And we can confirm that by the friction circle here too. Again, looking at how much more red he has here on the upper part. So definitely room for improvement there for the driver on the Hoosiers. And let's take a look at this big loss of time right here. Looks like this loss of time came mostly from just this little bit of extra brake pedal. So between hitting the brakes harder here and keeping on it a little bit longer, I think he got a lot of confidence on the brake pedal, but maybe that wasn't necessarily a good thing because that did end up dropping his G sum lower right at the same spot where he start losing time and speed.
Even though he was trying to get back after the throttle, you can see the throttle start to come up earlier. He's still losing time because he had just overslowed there, that last bit of the braking part. So
yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yep. It's always a balance, entry exit speed balance. Basically, he slowed the car so much that he was able to get to full throttle pretty quickly, but he was already so slow that it really didn't make up much of a difference in terms of the exit speed.
Yeah, if it's easy, I could do it. So that's it's hard. That's why you guys are so good at what you do.
Oh, that's what's cool about data is you think you're a good driver until you look at this stuff. And then
always can break down and find. You can always find more, certainly.
Yep.
Clear too, isn't it?
All right. So just moving on to turn 6 here. Much like turn 5, something stands out a lot to me in the brake zone here, right? This isn't twice as much deceleration G's, but man, it's a third. It's pretty close, right?
It's a lot more.
So again, the reds on the Toyos, that's a Slipperier tire. The Hoosiers are stickier. Why is the driver getting more bite out of the car here? We could take a look at his brake point. Maybe we could say he could have overshot the brake point a little bit. I'd want to look at that a little closer before I make a call on that. But I'm more specifically referring to the pressure on the brake pedal, right? If he was able to make these tires stick, right? And if the tires aren't sticking, you're not going to see an increase in G, right? It would either be level or a loss of G. So this is working, right? He's hitting the brakes hard. Potentially I could say maybe he could back that brake point up a little bit, especially since he lost so much on the exit there. But if he did that hard brake earlier on, he learned something for sure. He learned the rate at which the car can slow down, and you can now use that information as a tool to change your brake point and make things correct. Now you can see, there's that hard brake, right? G sum is pretty much similar right here, but he's losing a lot of time because he's still on that brake, whereas in the Hoosiers, he got to initial throttle and was starting to accelerate out of the turn. We can take a look at just simply his shifting here, right? Yeah. He actually had a really good run out of the turn. Even though he was slower, he was accelerating at a quicker rate. but he had a pretty slow upshift, and that pretty much mitigated all his gains, which we can see in the time compare bar too here. You know, he was actually starting to gain a little bit, had a slow shift, and then it kind of was neutral here. So, you know, you can do a good job in the corner, but it goes to show you that, you know, if you're not on your game with the small stuff, it can affect you for sure.
Kind of a cool little nugget of information when the one of the things we found out when we ran Spec Miata and then MX5 Cup is those little things when you don't have a ton of power really begin to add up. And if you have a throttle position sensor, just like Jonathan showed there, that red dip in the length of time that he was off the throttle as he performed that shift is 20% longer, just, you know, visually looking at that. And those things add up a ton. And you know, I did some real deep testing at Portland. We were testing down there at Spec Miata, and the difference between abusing the gearbox just a little bit versus, you know, a nice, good, fast, crisp shift ended up being like 3 or 4 tenths of lap time every single lap, and it added up. You'd pay a lot to go 4 tenths quicker in in motor, you know, tips and tricks, right? Trying to find that kind of lap time, and when the driver can do something that's maybe a little harder on the transmission, but it ended up being much faster. So that little a little nugget outside of our longitudinal G sum talk we're having here today is kind of fun to see.
Yeah, and you know, again, speaking of G sum, I just want to talk about this real quick.
There's one there. Right?
This is turn 7, and we were talking about that valley of opportunity before. It's easy to kind of jump to conclusions and say, oh, you don't want this drop in G sum here, but this corner is actually flat. This corner is full throttle in MX5. So if you're full throttle, you actually want the least G's possible, right? So you're scrubbing the tires less, resulting in more speed down the track. So, you know, if I had a little more time, I'd look a little more closer as to why this was happening. But things like that, you got to be aware of. You know, you got to ask, why is there the drop in G sum? Well, in this case, there is a good reason. He doesn't want the G's. And
maybe in this particular case, what you're going to try to do is find a way that maybe he can turn in a little earlier, a little later, and not have the initial spike, right? Not have that spike, and not, you know, take some speed out of the car. Because you can see if you take your cursor up, I'll click on it. If you can see visually right here that the acceleration rate, and then it kind of slows down a little bit, and then slows down all while he's got it G'd up. Anything we could take this away and have this be a little bit more smooth would help this thing accelerate even better. You can even see where the green one is a little bit slower, and he had it still turned in a little bit later, which pulled some speed out of a low horsepower car here in the way out. So it's there are times when we want to see that get as high as we can and be smooth, and other times we want to see it as low as we can, get the job done and be smooth, right? So both of them we want to have maybe get rid of the opportunity valley, but for different reasons. Interesting.
Exactly. So like I said before, you know, the more G's that the driver can produce, the better. In the case of a full throttle corner, the less. Every time, except for when it's not, right? Good point. Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
All right, so we're going to take a look at turn 8 here, see what the driver did. All right, so turn 8, Road America, pretty much just a more or less 90-degree left-hand corner. Pretty basic in the way that you want to load the car up under braking, have a smooth brake release, get the side load, and then as you roll onto power, you're unwinding your steering coming out of the turn, transitioning back into longitudinal acceleration. One thing that stands out at me immediately, again, we have the drop in G sum. We confirm that over here with the friction circle. Now, yes, the driver was a little slower through the turn, right? Judging by the time compare bar, right? But I think that the driver on the Toyos actually probably did a better job, right? Because he's getting to a similar rate of deceleration, and he's having a more linear progression of G sum and going from launch G to lat G back to launch G under acceleration. So, you know, it's looking to me like the driver did a really good job on the Toyos, and on the Hoosiers, he definitely left something on the table in this area. Now, it's easy to look at the speed trace and say, oh, you know, his minimum corner speed was higher. Oh, you know, he had a stickier tire. but that's not true, right? This drop in G sum proves that the driver did not make the best of the transition from brake release into cornering force and out of the turn, particularly on brake release in this area.
Yep, he did better, and there is more sticky, and there was more speed with the stickier tire, but it could have been even better, but based on looking at some of the G sum stuff.
Exactly. So it's a combination of both.
Yeah, very good, very good. While he's doing this, you all notice the technique. He goes, since we're looking at some specific things, he zooms out, you figure, okay, what's the next section I want to go look at? And then he zooms into it. We study it. He zooms back out, moves to the next one. Just a kind of a typical driver coach way of looking at the data. So it's I just wanted to point that out while you were doing that.
Yeah, those driver coaches, right? Yeah, so it's one of those things where, you're always trying to spend the least amount of time trying to find out the information you're trying to find. And I just find if I zoom all the way out, I kind of just get back to where I am. If you can actually move this left and right to kind of, move down to or from beginning or later part of the track, but I actually like to just zoom all the way out.
I maybe that came across maybe slightly not the way I meant it. I say that in a positive thing. When you're driver coaching, you're talking to somebody that maybe doesn't know the track all that well, doesn't know data well. By coming out, giving them the big picture, then zooming in, it is a very positive experience. That's the reason I meant it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes sense.
Okay.
All right. So taking a look at the carousel. Okay. This is the carousel at Road America. It's a very long duration, fast right-hand turn. You can see we're, basically in the neighborhood of a very rough guess around 100 miles an hour here, looking at the speed graph. Just a quick look at the friction circle right here. Don't worry about this info. This is just because I have the lift point right here as you come up to the kink. That's what you're seeing right there. But the meaty part of the friction circle right here is going to be all lateral G's, right? Because there really is not much acceleration or deceleration in the inverse longitudinal acceleration. Now, I could zoom in a little bit more and take this little spike out of the equation, which is the break point for the next corner. But I actually like to leave it here because, like I just said, we're so close to zero in terms of acceleration, deceleration, that I kind of want to look at it that way. I don't want to have a big graph with a lot of noise in it, right? So this is kind of why I scale it that way. Mm-hmm. Looking at our throttle position, we could expect, maybe a little bit higher throttle position as the driver produces a little bit more grip on the stickier tire, a little bit higher speed right here. You can see that he does get a little bit more bite out of the car right here, but no real gains. What I do see is that he has, on the Hoosiers, he has this big lift out of the gas. He had to come out of it all the way. He slowed down a lot. Looks like he probably pushed it a little too hard, just trying to keep a little bit too much throttle position in the carousel there. And we can take a look. Yeah, you can see how in the green, he was actually coming a bit wider with his line. He probably got a little over enthusiastic with the throttle here, right? And had to increase his steering, come out of the gas, put the load in the front, and he likely got a bit of an oversteer moment right there. So again, yeah, you could expect more throttle with a stickier tire, but in this case, it looked like it was a little bit too eager, for sure. And the car started seeking a bigger radius. He had to get out of it. So yeah, in this case, I think that the driver in the red did a better job, just because he didn't have this mistake at the end, right? He was just a little bit more disciplined here, was able to hold the line a little bit, have a nice squeeze of the throttle, and he didn't have this big drop in speed right here. And you can see the time compare bar, that obviously hurt him quite a bit, no doubt.
Interesting big lift right there in the middle of the screen, right?
Yeah, and then we're looking at, this is coming on to the next corner. So this is up to the kink here. The kink at Road America, a very fast right-hand corner.
Yeah, they call it the kink, but it's a lot sharper than what some people give it credit for sometimes, right? I mean,
yeah, it definitely can catch you off guard, to say the least. So we're looking at the kink corner here, headed up to, this is turn 12. Just looking at the kink, I want to look at major differences. Obviously here we're seeing on the Toyos, he had a big throttle lift, and on the Hoosiers, he didn't. And it was funny all week. He was telling me, "Oh, I want to go flat for the kink. I want to go flat for the kink." And all week I was telling him, "Well, actually, it's not that much faster, if any." I've actually found that with a lot of cars at Road America. Sometimes a slight breathe is actually a little bit quicker by the time you get to Canada Corner turn 12, because you're not scrubbing as much speed. So you can see here he has the big lift, but then by the time he gets to this point, right, he's actually gaining some time, right, and that's with the big throttle lift. You're seeing a bit of steering going on. This must be a function of lateral G if it's not a function of longitudinal G based on the math channel. So he's having some drama with the steering wheel here. And
going flat through the kink was maybe it hurt his speed on the way out.
Yeah, and this is more toward the exit of the corner, probably onto the straightaway after you have your hands straight. So this again goes to show you that lifting for the kink is not the worst thing in the world. Number one. Number two, if steering wheel position matters when you're full throttle in a low horsepower car, this is why you're seeing him lose a lot of speed. Again, there's a difference of 2 miles an hour or so by the time you get to the break point for 12.
Pretty long run though.
Oh yeah.
While you're getting set up for the next one, we did have we're bumping up against the clock a little bit, so we'll hustle those last few corners. Are Toyo tires easier to drive or more forgiving at the limit than Hoosiers? There's a question here about slicks and more of a racy tire versus a DOT tire. Is what do they feel like at the limit? Is there a big difference between these two, or is the driver feel kind of the same, but rather than just an overall increase of grip?
Typically a DOT street tire has a broader range of slip angle. So what that means is that, if the tire is sliding a little bit or a medium amount, it might be producing the same amount of grip, whereas a slick has a much more narrow window of slip angle. So you have to be really precise how much slip angles a tire have where it's producing the most grip. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily harder or easier. I would say it's just different. It's just something that the driver has to calibrate.
Yeah, there's that peak where the slick gives you more, but boy, if you step over it, in the slip angle, you give it a little bit too much, you start to slide a little bit more. Where the street tire, the opportunity window is quite a bit wider.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Perfect.
Right.
Let's finish up the lap, and we will see what it looks like.
Yeah. Look at 12 and 14 together here.
You see, he often goes right in and double clicks on that left scale bar, which is just giving an automatic scaling for the data traces we're looking at.
Yeah, and I do that just to make sure that I'm looking at the information that I need, right, and nothing else.
It's a good habit.
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot today about GSUM. This is a dip in GSUM on the brake release on both occasions, right? Yeah, the driver has a quicker min speed through here, slows a little more. Not necessarily completely a function of tire, because the driver is definitely leaving a little bit on the table in this area on the brake release. As he's coming off the brakes, he's not replacing that deceleration with lateral transition into the turn. So with this friction circle, we are seeing information from turn 12 and turn 14, just because of where the measures graph is zoomed into. But you can see that, the driver in the green should always have his friction circle be outboard of the red. And in this, it's just not the case.
Yeah, the shape is, it definitely shows some room for improvement.
Yep. All right, so on to the last turn here.
An important one with a low horsepower car. They're all important, but this one, you turn the corner, then you go flat for a little bit, and then you start uphill. And this will be interesting to see what the data kind of looks like as you start up the hill longitudinally.
Yeah, especially in that steep hill, you got to get out of the corner well. So, just taking a look at what we're looking at here, we got time compare bar. Little changes on entry to the corner, big change at the exit of the corner. Driver is much quicker coming out. He's gaining a lot of time on the Toyos. So again, this is a situation where, why is the driver further out on the friction circle with the Slipperier tire? Should be the other way around. Why is he gaining time on the Slipperier tire? Should be the other way around. Well, this is definitely something the driver did different. In this case, he backed up his brake point a little bit. This rewarded him with the opportunity to come off the brake and transition into some acceleration here as we're below the 0 line. That's a transition from deceleration to acceleration. We can back that up with the initial throttle. He actually got to full throttle later, but it doesn't look like it really hurt him come out of the turn. So this, brake release, initial throttle meant a lot here, and he's producing more G kind of in the meaty part of the turn right here, more G sum, right? This is mostly lateral G. Obviously he's picking up on the power, but there's still a lot of side load in the car. And interestingly enough, it looks like he probably ran out of road coming at the exit. I'd have to look a little closer, but he had this big throttle lift and a shift, and it still didn't really hurt him coming out. So this is a good case for brake release and initial throttle. We actually did. Sorry, Roger. We actually did a bit of testing here. Should the driver go in? This was third gear. Should the driver go into fourth gear, since the shift point identified right here is so close to where he gets to full throttle? Yeah, he had a little lift here, and I drove the car. Jaden drove the car. We both drove the car. We both did it both ways, and we found that even though the shift is so close to the full throttle point coming out of the turn, that third gear was faster.
Always let the data tell you what to do. You and I chatted about this a couple of days ago as well. But as soon as I saw that, it was like, well, maybe it's the exact same thing you guys had chatted about at the track. I love it that you end up using the data, and hey, if it's faster to do it a certain way, you do it that way. Obviously, very good.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys for today. A couple big takeaways, look at this friction circle all the time. If you're comparing two different tires like we have been in this situation, you got to make sure that the transitions from brake release to lateral acceleration, right, lateral cornering force, are at the outermost end of this. If they have a dip in, like we see this green thing, that means the driver is not doing the best job. And if you ever see a case where a Slipperier tire is outside the grippier tire in the friction circle, you got a problem, and you got to dive a little bit deeper to find out why. So I think that this is basically a question of taking some very basic channels, but looking at them in good detail, right? Because these channels, at the end of the day, the speed, the G sum are the most important for driver performance.
Very cool. The driver versus car, right? In this case, driver versus tire is what we're chatting a lot about. There we had a lot of little nuggets in there where we talked about other things, but that's kind of where we focused. I appreciate that, Jonathan. There was lots of great information. I hope all of you got some of that as well. Let me share back to the presentation materials. And kind of close this up, and we'll chat about maybe a couple other little things as we go. This video, along with all the rest of them that we've done, are heading straight out to the YouTube AIM data page. We've got 133 videos there. This will be number 134. Just tons of information there for you. YouTube doesn't give you a great way of searching, but you can search by certain words and really narrow it down to the kind of the stuff that you're looking for. And I find that it works pretty well. So go visit the YouTube site and see some of the other ones that we've done. Again, the data files for this will be in the description box below in the YouTube description box, and data files, user profiles, and math channels that Jonathan used today will all be there, so you can replicate this and actually look at the actual data that Jonathan was working with. We really appreciate our co-hosts coming in and sharing the data with us. That's always a great thing. Makes it much easier for people to learn, so appreciate that. Customer support, just like Jonathan always helping his customers, we're always out there doing the best we can to help all of our AIM users. If it's getting late in the year, maybe we don't see you at the track for a little bit, make sure you give us a call. The 800 number is right there, 800-718-9090. We'd love to chat with you and talk with you. So give us the opportunity to help you walk through. Maybe you're going to get some new hardware over the winter, or maybe you're practicing with some of your data files. Boy, give us a holler. The next webinar. The next webinar we're going to have is Tuesday, December 1st. We have the United States holiday here. Our Thanksgiving Day is this coming Thursday, so we will not be doing a webinar. So the next one we'll do is a week from today, Tuesday, December 1st. We're going to talk about Race Studio analysis, Race Studio 3 analysis out there. For those of you that want to be using it, there's a beta version out there. You go to our website and you can click on it or send me an email. I'll send you the link if you can't find it. A lot of updates have been happening from our friends in Italy, showing you a little bit of what some of these changes may look like, or are kind of shown in this screen capture. By the time that we gather together in a week and talk about it, we will have updated the beta, and you'll have a lot of the stuff that's in our development versions will be in beta and ready for you. You see that there's actually some track map segmenting going on here. There's maybe some different things that you may see different of those of you that have been using it quite a bit. So Emiliano will be joining us here on Tuesday, December 1st. Looking forward to that, where we'll have our 5th update on Race Studio 3 analysis. Okay, and to kind of close this out, here's some contact information. Jonathan is, again, this is his 2nd one that he's done with us. I know that he got a lot of questions during the first one. Here's his email address, ways to get a hold of him. Jonathan also has a great website, Jonathan Goring. It's just Jonathan Goring. Is it Motorsports or JonathanGoring.com?
No, it's just JonathanGoring.com.
JonathanGoring.com. He's got some pretty cool stuff out there. Lots of really interesting articles. Robbie just posted it into the chat box. Really cool articles. You can kind of self-coach off of a little bit as well, and learn even more from him. So, Jonathan, anything you'd like to add as we kind of close this one out?
I just want to invite everyone to reach out if you have any questions about anything we covered today. And definitely, please go check out my website. I have some free driving articles, which just covers basic general driving theory. So something that can really apply to everyone. So thank you guys for the opportunity to do this. And I appreciate all you guys watching.
And I appreciate you coming and doing this, Jonathan. I know it is a lot of extra work, and putting it all together to do it well. You did it very well again this time. So I appreciate all the extra effort that you put into it to help the community as a whole. We got a lot of people out here that are watching these and trying to learn some different things. Robbie just linked one of the ones that Robbie says it's very interesting. I find it to be one of the most interesting, as always, improving your eye work and improving where you're looking at on the track. One of the things that a lot of people don't either understand, and if they do understand it, don't do well. So take a look at that one. Maybe I'll link that one into the description box of the YouTube video as well. So I appreciate everybody. Thanks for coming. Again, thank you very much, Jonathan. Look forward to seeing you all in a week as when we come back next Tuesday and we talk about Race Studio 3 and the new analysis program. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.